You didn't lose your mind. You were made to question it. There is a difference. One is something that happens to you. The other is something that was done to you deliberately, systematically, over time, until you could no longer tell the difference between your own thoughts and the ones they planted there. You probably spent months, maybe years, wondering if you were too sensitive, too reactive, too dramatic, replaying conversations, trying to figure out if your memory was accurate, apologizing for things you weren't even sure you did, walking into rooms and forgetting why you were angry because they had already reframed what happened before you could process it. That is not confusion. That is a result. It is the result of a very specific process. And that process has a name. Stay with me because once you understand exactly how gaslighting works, word by word, move by move, you will never be confused by it again. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what gaslighting is, not the word, not the label, but the actual mechanism. You will recognize the 7 phrases that gaslight most effectively, why each one works on the specific type of person it targets, and what to say or not say when you hear them. More importantly, you will understand why you believed it. Not because you were weak, not because you were naive, because you were the exact kind of person this process was designed for. The word gaslighting gets used so often now that people think they understand it. They don't. They understand the label. They do not understand the architecture. Knowing the name of what happened to you is not the same as understanding how it was built inside you, which phrase by phrase, which conversation by conversation, which apology by apology. It replaced your reality with theirs. That is what we are going to look at today. The architecture, phrase 1. This is the most common, and it is the most effective because it attacks the instrument you use to detect harm. Think about what this phrase actually does. You say, "That hurt me." They say, "You're too sensitive." In one sentence, they have shifted the conversation from what they did to who you are. The problem is no longer their behavior. The problem is your perception of their behavior. And because you are a person who is willing to examine yourself because that is what makes you good, you actually consider it. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I take things the wrong way. Maybe the problem isn't what they said. Maybe the problem is how I received it. And the moment you start asking those questions, they have won the conversation. Not because they were right, because they turned your self-awareness into a weapon against you. Empathetic people are the ideal target for this phrase because they are the ones most willing to ask, "Could I be wrong?" And that willingness to self-examine is exactly what makes the phrase land so hard. What to do? When you hear, "You're too sensitive," your perception is not the subject of this conversation. What they did is, you are allowed to say, "I'm not discussing my sensitivity. I'm discussing what happened." Phrase 2. This one is more aggressive, and it targets your memory directly. You bring up an event, something they did or said that hurt you. They say, "That never happened." Not, "I don't remember it that way." Not, "I think you misunderstood." That never happened. The absolute denial. And here is why it is so effective. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you remember something, you are rebuilding it, not playing it back like a video. They know this. Maybe not consciously, but they know that if they say it with enough certainty, if they hold the denial steady long enough, you will start to doubt your own reconstruction. You will replay it. And replay it again, trying to find the place where you might have misremembered, trying to be fair. And while you are busy being fair, they are not being fair at all. They are holding a certainty they don't actually have because they do remember. They are just betting that your willingness to question yourself is stronger than your certainty about what happened. Often, they are right. What to do? Write things down. Not to prove anything to them, you will never win that argument. Write things down to prove it to yourself. Your memory, documented at the time, is not something they can retroactively rewrite. Phrase 3. This phrase doesn't attack a specific memory. It attacks your entire perception system. It is the phrase that is designed to make you afraid of your own mind. When you hear "you're crazy," even if you dismiss it consciously, a part of you files it. Because you have never been told that about yourself before. Because the person saying it knows you intimately. Because their certainty is so absolute that it creates doubt in proportion to how much you trust them. And here is what makes it particularly insidious. The more you react to the phrase, the more upset you become when they call you crazy, the more they point to your reaction as evidence. See? Look how you're reacting. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Your distress at being called crazy becomes proof in their framing that you are. So you learn to suppress the reaction, to stay calm, to prove you're not what they're saying. And in doing so, in managing your own very legitimate emotional response, you have just done exactly what they needed you to do. What to do? Your reaction to being mistreated is not evidence that you are unstable. It is evidence that you are human. You do not owe anyone a calm response to cruelty. Phrase 4. Softer than that never happened. But more dangerous because it sounds reasonable. This phrase doesn't flatly deny reality. It just adjusts it. Slightly. That's not what I said. I said, you're taking it out of context. What actually happened was, you always do this. You remember the worst version of everything. It allows them to rewrite the past while appearing measured and fair. And you, because you are trying to be fair, because you actually want to get it right, you let them walk you through their version. And their version is almost the same as yours, just enough different to shift the blame. The comment they made was just a joke. The silence was not punishment, they were just tired. The thing they said about your family was not an attack, they were trying to help. And because each adjustment is small, because each revision is subtle, you accept it. And over time, you are living inside their version of events. Your version, the accurate one, is gone. What to do? Trust the feeling, even when the facts are being disputed. If something felt wrong, that information matters. You do not need their agreement for your experience to have been real. Phrase 5. This is the phrase that isolates. When they cannot win the argument with you directly, they bring in witnesses. I talked to Name about this, and they agreed with me. Everyone can see it except you. Your own family thinks you overreact. Real or invented, it doesn't matter. The function is the same. It makes you feel surrounded, outnumbered. Like the problem is not one person's perspective, it is your perspective against the world. And because humans are social creatures, because we are wired to care what our group thinks, this phrase reaches something very deep. The fear of being alone in your perception. The fear that everyone can see something about you, that you cannot see yourself. And so you consider it. Maybe they are all right. Maybe I am the one who can't see clearly. That consideration, that moment of social doubt, is the goal. What to do? Ask for specifics. Who? When? What did they say exactly? They will almost never have specifics, because the witnesses are often invented or the conversation was one-sided and carefully curated. The vagueness is the tell. Phrase 6. This is where gaslighting becomes cruelest, because this phrase does not just rewrite the past. It rewrites cause and effect. It makes you responsible for their behavior. If you didn't push me, I wouldn't have to say these things. I wouldn't be like this if you weren't so difficult. You drive me to this. And if you have been in this cycle long enough, if the previous 5 phrases have done their work, you believe it. Because you have already been convinced that your perception is distorted, your memory is unreliable, your reactions are extreme, and everyone around you agrees. So of course it must be you. Of course you are the source of the chaos. Of course if you were different, calmer, less sensitive, more understanding, none of this would be happening. This phrase works because it gives you agency in a situation where you have been stripped of it. You can't fix their behavior. But maybe if this is your fault, you can fix yours. That hope, the hope of control, is what keeps you trying. What to do? Another person's behavior is not your responsibility to manage. You are not the author of their choices. Someone who treats you badly because of how you behaved has still made a choice. That choice is theirs. Phrase 7. The exit phrase. When the other 6 have been challenged, when you have held your ground despite everything, they reach for this one. It is the erasure button. Whatever they said, however cutting, however deliberate, however targeted, becomes a joke. And now, you are the problem again. Not for what they said, but for not understanding it was a joke. You can't take a joke. Why are you always so dramatic? I was kidding. Why do you always have to make everything a big deal? And the thing that makes this phrase particularly effective is that it carries social shame. No one wants to be the person who can't take a joke. No one wants to be dramatic. So you second guess whether you reacted too strongly. You apologize for taking it seriously. You let the thing that was said go because the alternative is being the person who makes everything a big deal. And they walk away clean. What to do? You are allowed to decide what is and isn't funny to you. A joke that consistently targets your insecurities, your fears, or your vulnerabilities is not a joke. It is a test of what you will accept. 7 phrases. You're too sensitive. That never happened. You're crazy. You're remembering it wrong. Everyone agrees with me. You're making me act this way. I was just joking. Each one of them does the same thing, in a different way. They move the conversation away from their behavior and toward your perception. And they work specifically on people who are willing to examine themselves, people who are fair-minded, people who genuinely want to understand other perspectives, people who are by nature thoughtful and self-questioning. In other words, they were designed for you, not because you are weak, because you are exactly the opposite of weak. The cruelest irony of gaslighting is that it weaponizes the best parts of you, your empathy, your self-awareness, your willingness to be wrong, and uses them against you. And now that you know that, now that you can see each phrase for exactly what it is, they lose power, not because the person stopped using them, because you stopped absorbing them as truth. The mirror doesn't lie. And now, you know what to look for in the reflection. Which of these 7 phrases have you heard? Drop it in the comments. Just the number. Phrase 3, phrase 6, phrase 7. Because the moment you name it, the moment you say that is what was happening, it changes. It doesn't change overnight, but it changes. And if you know someone who is living inside one of these phrases right now, confused, doubting themselves, wondering if they're the problem, share this video with them. Not with an explanation, not with an argument, just this. Subscribe to the mirror effect. Because the clearer you see, the freer you become.